Welcome to the National Pulse, the official podcast of the Fitness Industry Council of Canada. I'm your host, Zach Weston, and we are the collective voice of over 7,000 facilities and 7 million members from coast to coast to coast. From the steps of Parliament Hill in Ottawa to the floor of your local gym, we are here to discuss the policy, the people, and the passion driving our industry forward. We're talking to the innovators, the disruptors, and the leaders who are evolving the Canadian fitness business landscape with the goal to support, promote, and protect our industry while we move to make Canada the fittest nation on earth.
As a Canadian, so first and foremost, I want to support the Canadian fitness industry.
Welcome back to the show. It is now time for part 2 of our conversation with Brad Thorpe from Isofit.
They took their 4,500 square foot facility and basically in that space, 400 to 500 square feet of that 4,500 square foot facility is dedicated to isometrics. So they've been able to take their front foyer and added $1 million in business. Exactly, and there was a paper early this year as well, where it just looked at injury rates over the last 10 or 15 years, actually, in fitness centers and throughout the United States. And most of the injuries were associated with just moving weight through space or dropping weight on you, or so those simple things. So, as for the industry, if we can make the environment safer, well, we reduce the risk of not only hurting people, and Canada's not so bad for this, but also potential lawsuits, right? Like, what injuries could we help prevent if we just sort of said, hey, let's focus on the isometric side. Let's push into something that doesn't move to build some of these strengths versus, you look at some of the stuff we see on YouTube now and or Instagram or TikTok. It's like you have to be in Cirque du Soleil to do these exercises. And it's like, yeah, that's challenging. That's complex. Where's the value versus the risk? And it really just comes back to, at the end of the day, we need to, in my opinion, make exercise safer, more effective, and more efficient. Because, really, when you look at the stats, what is it? Not URSA. They changed the name to
HFA.
HFA, Health and Fitness Association. They historically would sort of bring out their annual sort of membership and what level of what's the actual usage rate. And, we got up to about 2 days per week, and that was the highest it's been, right? So you look at that and you go 2 out of 7 days, you're not even or 5 out of 7, you're not at the gym if you're a good member. That's the average. But even then, only 20% of the American population actually belongs to a gym. So we're missing something from a messaging perspective. We keep going after the same 20%, but I think if we changed our messaging, we have 80% of the population we can talk to. If we say, hey, maybe before you move, you can actually learn how to contract muscle. When you learn how to contract muscle, it's actually going to take away the pain or reduce the risk of joint and muscle pain. You're also going to improve your cardiovascular function. You're going to improve your tendon, muscle, and bone strength. Oh, and you're also going to accelerate adipose tissue loss. Because one of the things they're seeing with isometrics, we know muscles burn calories. Nobody's going to dispute that. Well, if I can activate the muscle tissue at a higher percentage doing isometric than I can dynamically, and the stats are basically 95 to 100% during an isometric of activation of tissue to about 88, 89% dynamically, because you can't activate it at 100% because you got to be able to move, right? So you got built-in inefficiencies associated with that. Not right, not wrong, just is.
Well, what it jumps to mind when you talk about just the reality that we live in, and the opportunity for rehabilitation, prevention, preparation. We have an increasing population of folks not only in Canada but globally who are now really relying on GLP-1 receptor agonist medications to help them with weight management, diabetes, etc. But of course, one of the risks and complications with that, not just the gastrointestinal distress, but the muscle wasting and muscle atrophy that is associated with it. And for a long time we've had resistance strengthening exercises at least twice a week included within the Canadian physical activity guidelines. And arguably, I think there's evidence, and we could have a whole nother discussion on whether it should be more than 2 days a week in terms of health outcomes and health benefits with regards to strength training, and increasingly perhaps amongst the population of folks who are taking medications that have an adverse impact on muscles. Um, but from the business and industry future perspective, we think about, the Fitness Industry Council of Canada perspective. We look at the fitness industry in 2026, and we are seeing a shift toward longevity clinics and wellness. And, curious your thoughts. Where does a specialized tool like IsoFit fit into the traditional big box gym, or a boutique clinical fitness studio? And I know you've got some examples that you could share where fitness facility owners have already unlocked new revenue potential by adding ISOFIT and isometric training exercise programs. What can
Uh,
you share with us on that front?
Well, from a gerontology perspective or a longevity perspective, more so, because that's a cooler word, there was a piece of literature that came out, I think it was last year, the year before, and what they were looking at was, does dynamic exercise and, movement-based exercise improve longevity? And they were looking at sort of in dynamic leg extension. And now subsequently, some of the other stuff that they saw was an isometric style exercise. So, of course, this was not what the research was on, but I looked at it and go, okay, well, the dynamic side increased longevity by 14%, which is absolutely great. But one of the things they noticed was by having an increase in isometric strength, they found that it actually increased longevity by 31%, right? And if you're comparing 14 to 31, both are still good, but one of the things you got to look at, well, 31 is 220% better than 14. So if the goal is actually improve longevity, well, if I can improve my ability to contract muscle better and more effectively, more efficiently, then I can move better. So that's clear as day. And one of the things when you look at the research, improving dynamic strength does not correlate to better isometric strength. When you actually do isometrics along a path of motion, like multiple exercises, it's on par with increasing dynamic strength, right? It actually makes you stronger from a range perspective. But one of the things that we are seeing is by offering a wider audience of people, you get that conversation about exercise, right? Oh, I'm doing something new, right? No, not to say nobody's promoting Pilates, but most fitness facilities don't have Pilates studios in them. They just don't. Pilates has separated and stood on its own for, many, many, many years. So what we do, and historically also, you look at things like Pilates, that would get subsectioned into it's for women historically, right? Not trying to sound sexist or anything like that, but historically, Pilates was pushed towards women. With isometrics and what we're doing with ISOFIT, because we have the majority of our athletes are male using isometrics or ISOFIT, we've pigeonholed ourselves. We're broad spectrum human, right? So, and in a Pilates situation, if you're dealing with a football guy, maybe not always, they may be too strong for some of the cable systems. Not always, but in most cases, or some cases, where in our scenario, you're able to match your force in real time. So it just allows for a greater audience. But one of our good customers down in Connecticut, so they came to us and it was in just 2020. So we're just entering the COVID era. They came to us 2019, 2020. They'd sort of picked up 4 of our ISOFIT strength trainers, so our larger units. So they were getting their flow going, hit COVID, jump forward to 2021 when they sort of opened up down in the States again. So they basically started fresh. So they were doing about $400,000, $450,000 annually in sales. Brought in ISOFIT. So we're 2025 now. So 2 years ago, they were about $900,000 in ISOFIT sales. They're now over $1 million in ISOFIT sales annually. And they took their 4,500 square foot facility and basically in that space, 400 to 500 square feet of that 4,500 square foot facility is dedicated to isometrics. So they've been able to take their front foyer and added $1 million in business.
Yeah.
And the company is
And just yeah, and sorry to interject, just to clarify, that's it's $1 million of ISOFIT related programming services,
correct.
not that they're selling ISOFIT training devices, but because they have added those 4 units, they have unlocked that much business revenue service programming to complement the other services that they already offered before.
Correct. So it gave them a new revenue stream. Now they subsequently doubled their capacity to 8 units, which obviously just helps, from a class size perspective, right? And if you think about like things like historically spin class, right? Not necessarily in a big box gym environment, but you look at like a Soul Cycle, and obviously they've had their ups and downs over the years, and in Canada more so Spinco. They've proven that people are willing to pay $30 per session. Pilates, same thing. Yoga, same thing. So what we've done is basically looked at some of those business models and say, hey, well, if you have a group class scenario, let's say you had 10 ISOFITs. Well, on a per revenue basis, let's say I'm charging $25 and it's a half-hour class and I'm sitting at 100% occupation or occupancy, so it's $250 half hour. If I just simply do 4 classes a day, which is 2 hours of committed time, that's $1,000 a day. So on a 10-unit package, to give you perspective, if it's financed, you're looking at $300 a month, right? That window on our smaller unit, a little bit more expensive for our larger unit. But if I'm able to add $1,000 extra per day, start there. Then what happens is, well, what if I do 4 hours a day of classes? Well, now you've just doubled that. You're already up to $600,000. It didn't cost you any more. It didn't take up any more space. Oh, and you guys operationally are 12 hours a day. So could you further expand that opportunity? Because let's say I had you as my instructor, Zach. Hey, Zach, I want you to get better and I want you to get busy. And I'm going to have you become an expert in a subject area that's at the forefront of something new and unique and a key differentiating within your community. Oh, yeah, and you're going to follow a system and it's already laid out for you. And all you have to do is be fun and exciting and charismatic and know how to actually interrelate with a human, as opposed to get up there and, you look at some of the aerobic stuff, you actually require a ton of skill to do aerobics, right? That's a specific population versus, hey, here's 30 exercises. I'm literally going to set up a timer. It's going to be 45 seconds. It's going to be 15-second transition time. We're going to go through 30 different exercises, and you're going to basically notice a significant change in your look, feel, and function within the first week of use, because we're adapting the neurological system, right, from a training perspective. You calorically, you had basically 22 and a half minutes of time under tension, 7.5 minutes of rest. So it's intense enough, but safe enough. So the result that you're going to see is significant that you tell your friends. And it's good for somebody in their, later years who obviously doesn't have health issues, because you'd approach it differently if you had a health issue. But general population wise, it's good for everyone from youth athletes all the way through to, we have our oldest person that I know is 94 using ISOFIT in the 30 and 30 model. So it's like you look at that and you go, if it's good for a 94-year-old, but it's always going to match their output. So you're not competitive, right? So yeah, it's pretty remarkable what we're seeing.
And it's something that on the surface seems so simple, yet we've spent the better part of the last hour talking about how valuable it can be from a physiological, scientific health perspective, and now from the business side of things, it can add so much more interest, more variety, but also, importantly, revenue for businesses, while also, helping the clientele to have access to programming that does elevate their health, does elevate, their ability to do exercises in a safe mechanism or in a recovery phase if they are, returning from an injury. So, I've only a few more questions for you, but ISOFIT has recently become a gold level sponsor of the Fitness Industry Council of Canada. So thank you. We greatly appreciate that. Um, Brad, why did you choose to partner with the FIC and what does it mean for ISOFIT?
I want to, as a Canadian, so first and foremost, I want to support the Canadian fitness industry, right? Obviously, as I've grown ISOFIT, I'll be honest, I had to go abroad before I've been accepted back in Canada. Unfortunately, that's what it is. And I think with the FIC, it's going to give me a better platform to help broaden our reach. I think obviously we've had a relationship for several years. So you look at the FIC, you look at your former relationship with CSEP and just the network of individual that you bring to the table. But it comes back to being able to sort of have somebody like you champion, whether it's within, the political landscape in Ottawa, about how do we make fitness more accessible to a broader audience. It's going to come back to having people not named Brad talking about the benefits and values of isometrics, right? We can look at like the Heart and Stroke Foundation. We can look at Hypertension Canada from a cardiovascular perspective. Can we get them on board with something that's not necessarily heart? Because you have to look at the extension of, well, if I can take stress off the heart, maybe we can get them on board through the FIC to help further champion a thought process. You have a relationship with universities. Maybe all of a sudden that Heart Stroke Foundation goes, oh, there's this thing called isometrics, which we've historically sort of said don't do. And the last time I looked, it wasn't even mentioned on their website that isometrics is important. That was subsequently about a year and a half ago, so that may have changed. But all of a sudden, if we can help, let's say, I think Canada's like sitting at about 40% individuals with hypertension. So if we can help 40% of the population, because we just added a new philosophy, a new training methodology, we can look at that and go, okay, that's going to be beneficial. But that's going to help. Like if you're championing it in Ottawa and they're championing it over here, and all I'm doing is just saying, hey, look at it this way, right? Because I'm not a researcher. That's not what I do. I'm certainly the biggest fan of isometrics you will ever meet because of what it does for all of the people that we see. And we're talking near instantly. Like this is not something that's going to take 3 weeks. As I mentioned, I struggled with blood pressure for 14 years and I resolved it in 2 weeks. And that was just using a wall. Now that we actually have product, we had a lady in Portugal, she dropped 26 millimeters of mercury in 2 workouts, and it's like, and her diastolic was something like 19. And it's like, okay, well, that's a problem for medicated people. So there is risk, right? If you rapidly drop blood pressure and you don't necessarily require the medication anymore. So there needs to be sort of a thought process around that. It's like, okay, cool. You're medicated because you got blood pressure. We're now going to do isometrics. Brad said it was good for lowering blood pressure, and it really is good for lowering blood pressure. Oh, but there is also risk of lowering it too fast. One of the ladies that I used to work with showed double lung transplant recipient. She's diabetic, so she lost her kidney as well, or a kidney transplant as well. So unfortunately, she had cystic fibrosis. She had her liver stuff associated with medication. So she started using ISOFIT and she was using insulin. So she reduced her insulin level or insulin requirement by half within the first 2 workouts. Which are numbers that are so astronomically, because this doesn't happen.
Remarkable
Yeah,
changes. Yeah,
yeah.
there's so many different patient populations that this can unlock the introduction to other forms of exercise, and also generate some positive health benefits along the way.
Man, it's so crazy because you think about like the role of the muscular system. Natural tone of muscle is isometric, right? How we're sitting here right now, we're being held isometrically. So the broad spectrum you can now look at from an employee wellness perspective, sitting at desk for long periods of time. Sitting at a desk is isometric, right? You're not sitting here in a desk gyrating around as you sort of sit there and type all day. So it's like we haven't prepared our population for the life they live, right? You sleep all day, so you went compressive loading all day long, then you go side lying. So one of the things, so when we circle back to where FIC comes in, you guys become an advocacy for not ISOFIT, you guys become an advocacy for a type of movement we omitted as an industry, right? There's ways that businesses can profit from it. There's ways that individuals who support these businesses can benefit from. And more so, the extensions of the economic impact that this can have from a basically a nation level perspective. If we reduce the impact of blood pressure to call it, let's say we reduce it by 30% in this country, that's going to have a significant impact on our, our basically the economic side of what we pay into our universal health care stuff. But more so the day-to-day impact of the individual who is not spending a fortune on physical therapists or other treatment methodologies to feel better when the physical therapist is going to turn to isometrics first anyways.
Yeah, we know that there's no question we need to do more in prevention, and we need to find mechanisms to make it easy. And I'm not saying that the ISOFIT program is necessarily easy, but what I love about it is you can scale it so quickly to the level of the individual, whether they are someone living with a chronic condition or an Olympic level athlete. Uh, you can use the exact same piece of equipment and get this, the appropriate return on impact from using that tool. It's really remarkable, and it's been awesome to chat with you about this today, and I'm excited to see the growth and the adoption of ISOFIT across Canada. And the FIC is great to have. I'm very proud to have you as one of our sponsors. But before we go, I've got a segment that we're calling Fast Twitch, and so I've got five quick questions for you. So what you need to do, Brad, is you need to give me the first answer that comes to mind without overthinking it. So, are you ready?
Perfect. Let's do this.
All right, so the first question, the big three, squats, bench, or deadlift. Which is the most underrated for isometric holds?
Oh, definitely deadlift.
Awesome. Two, the athlete mindset. Who is harder to convince about isometrics? A pro athlete or a weekend warrior?
Weekend warrior.
Three, the secret sauce. What is the one joint or muscle group that everyone neglects but needs isometrics for the most?
Cervical spine.
Love it. And I will just add another personal anecdote that every single time I use my ISOFIT training tool, my back feels better. Every
Yep.
single time, 100%. Uh, Number four, growth. What was a bigger win for you? Your first patent or your first professional team contract?
Oh, first pat. Hands down. It gave me the landscape.
And finally, number five, legacy. 20 years from now, Brad, do you want to be remembered as an inventor or an educator?
Ooh. Ooh. Hands down educator. I'm the guy who changed the world.
Awesome. Well, I don't think that there's anybody who's a bigger champion waving the flag for the importance of incorporating isometrics into our training. And I really want to thank you for joining me today. It's rare that we get to pull back the curtain on the physics of human movement quite like this, like we did today. And you've given us a lot to think about, especially the idea that the strength that we build with isometrics is often the very thing that protects us from the chaos of sport and daily life.
Yeah.
So, whether you're a gym owner looking at the future of your facility or an athlete looking to break through a plateau, you know, ISOFIT that Brad has created is truly, in my opinion, a masterclass in working smarter, not just harder. And so, for those listening, I highly encourage you to check out ISOFIT's resources and Brad's blogs. There's so much information that Brad has created, to understand how isometrics and integration of using ISOFIT can really fundamentally change your approach to your training, your performance, your longevity. Brad, thanks for leading the charge here in Canada and beyond, and to everyone tuning in, stay strong, stay curious, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. Love it.